For 3 months, Security was bleeding money. Not thousands, not millions, almost $2 billion. And the worst part? No one knew why. Security was not just any company. It was one of the most trusted cybersecurity firms in the country. Banks used it. Government agencies used it. International corporations depended on it. If Security failed, data would be exposed. Contracts would collapse. Trust would disappear. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the system crashed. Servers froze. Encrypted files became unreadable. Backup systems failed to respond. Then, just as mysteriously, everything restarted. Clean. No trace. No clear error message. It was like a ghost was living inside the system. Engineers worked day and night. They replaced hardware. They rewrote sections of code. They ran deep diagnostics. Nothing worked. The board of directors started whispering. Investors began pulling back. Competitors started circling. And in the center of the storm sat Roland White, 62 years old, founder, CEO, visionary, and for the first time in decades, powerless. Roland White had built Security from nothing. 35 years ago, he had no investors, no connections, no rich parents, just an old computer, a rented apartment, and a belief that cybersecurity would become the backbone of the future. He used to sleep beside loud servers. He skipped meals to pay for software licenses. He once coded for 48 hours straight without sleep. He knew what it meant to struggle. But this was different. Now he sat inside a glass-walled office on the 40th floor. The city lights blinked below him. Awards and Frame magazine covers decorated his walls. But none of that mattered tonight. On his desk was a red folder. Loss report. He opened it again. Projected quarterly loss. $1.9 billion. His jaw tightened. The head of engineering had said earlier that day, "We've never seen anything like this." Roland had replied coldly, "Then look harder." But deep inside, he was afraid, because if his top engineers could not find the problem, maybe the problem was bigger than they thought. Maybe this was not a glitch. Maybe it was sabotage. Or worse, maybe someone inside Security was responsible. It was past midnight. Most of the building was dark. Only emergency lights glowed faintly along the hallway floors. Roland rarely stayed this late anymore. Age had slowed him down. But tonight, sleep was impossible. He walked into the server monitoring room. Large screens displayed data flows and encrypted traffic streams. Everything looked normal. Too normal. "That's what worries me," he muttered. He checked the log files again. No suspicious login attempts. No malware signatures. No traceable intrusion. But the crash kept happening. Every single night. He leaned back in his chair. "What are we missing?" he whispered. The silence of the building felt heavy. And then he noticed something strange. On one of the monitoring screens, a tiny spike appeared, then disappeared. So fast, it almost looked like imagination. Roland stood up slowly. He zoomed in on the log trail. There, a brief unauthorized internal access. Not external. Internal. From inside the building. His heartbeat quickened. Someone was accessing the development server. Right now, Roland stepped into the hallway. The office floor was supposed to be empty. Only cleaning staff were allowed after 10 p.m. The lights were off, except for one. At the far end of the corridor, a faint blue glow shone from under a developer office door. Roland walked quietly. Each step felt heavier. He didn't call security yet. He wanted to see this himself. He pushed the door open and froze. Sitting at the large developer desk was a boy. Small, thin, focused, no older than 12. His fingers moved across the keyboard quickly, confidently. Lines of code filled the screen. Roland's face hardened. "What are you doing?" he demanded sharply. The boy flinched but did not run. He turned slowly in his chair. "I'm fixing it," he said calmly. Roland stepped closer. "You're doing what?" "The glitch," the boy replied. "I know what's causing it." Roland's voice grew cold. "Who are you?" "My name is Daniel." "And how did you get into my encrypted system?" Daniel hesitated for a second, then said quietly, "I guess the internal authentication pattern." Roland stared at him. That was nearly impossible. Within seconds, Roland pressed the emergency button on the wall. Security alarms beeped softly. Footsteps rushed down the hallway. The door burst open. 2 guards entered. Behind them, Mary. She looked terrified. "Daniel," she cried. "What are you doing here?" Roland turned sharply. "You know this boy?" Mary's hands trembled. "He's my grandson. I bring him sometimes when I work late. I didn't know he was in here. I'm so sorry, sir. Please forgive us." Roland's voice was firm. "Your grandson just breached my main development server." Mary's face went pale. Daniel stood up slowly. "I wasn't trying to steal anything," he said. One guard stepped forward. "Sir, should we escort him out?" Roland held up his hand. "Wait." He looked directly at Daniel. "You hacked into a system that even my senior engineers cannot access without clearance." Daniel swallowed but met Roland's eyes. "I didn't hack it to damage it," he said quietly. "I hacked it because your encryption has a recursive loop." The room went silent. Roland narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say?" Daniel pointed to the screen. "Your algorithm calls itself over and over. It creates ghost processes. They grow quietly in the background until the system crashes." Mary looked confused. The guards looked confused. But Roland did not, because that was exactly what his team suspected. But they could not prove it. Roland stepped closer to the screen. "Show me," he said. And for the first time that night, his anger began turning into curiosity. The room felt smaller now. The security guard stood still. Mary held her breath. Roland stepped closer to the screen. Daniel moved aside but kept his hands near the keyboard. "Show me exactly what you mean," Roland said, his voice low and controlled. Daniel nodded. He pulled up Securit's encryption core, the very heart of the company's security system, a program so advanced that governments trusted it. He scrolled slowly. "This function," Daniel said, pointing to a block of code, "verifies data packets before encryption." Roland's eyes followed. "Yes," he said. "It validates integrity before locking it." Daniel nodded. "But inside that function, it calls itself again." Roland frowned. "That's normal recursion." "Yes," Daniel replied, "but it never fully stops." Silence. Roland leaned closer. "What do you mean it never stops?" Daniel typed quickly and highlighted a line. "See this condition? It checks if the data is stable. But if the data packet has even a tiny fluctuation, the function repeats." Roland crossed his arms. "That's by design." Daniel shook his head gently. "It repeats, but it doesn't release the previous process." Roland's eyes widened slightly. "Explain." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "It creates a second copy, then a third, then a fourth, each one invisible, each one waiting." Mary didn't understand. The guards didn't understand. But Roland did. Daniel continued. "They stack up quietly in memory. They don't crash immediately. They grow slowly. Then at 2:17 a.m., when system load increases." He paused. "They collide." Roland pulled a chair and sat down. "Run a simulation," he ordered. Daniel nodded. He opened the memory monitor. Numbers began to scroll rapidly. At first, everything looked normal. Then Daniel manually triggered the encryption verification. 1 process appeared. Then 2. Then 5. Then 15. Roland's breathing changed. "Why hasn't our team seen this?" he muttered. Daniel replied softly, "Because they were looking for external attacks." Roland stared at the growing list of background processes. "They assumed someone was hacking you from outside," Daniel said. "But the attack is inside the logic." The memory usage meter began rising. 10%, 22%, 35%. Roland's voice sharpened. "Stop it before it crashes." Daniel quickly terminated the loop. The system stabilized. Mary exhaled loudly. Roland stood up slowly. This has been draining our servers every night." Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." Roland looked at the code again. "But this function was written 5 years ago." Daniel's reply was simple. "It only activates under specific data stress conditions. When traffic is low, it sleeps. When traffic spikes at night, it multiplies." Roland whispered, "A silent self-destruction." Roland turned to the security guards. "Close the door. No one enters." They obeyed. Roland removed his jacket. "Let's test your theory properly." Daniel swallowed. He knew this was the moment. Roland connected to a secondary secure server, one isolated from the main network. "If you're wrong," Roland said calmly, "you understand this is serious." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Roland began replicating the exact server conditions from previous crash nights. Heavy data load, multiple verification requests, high encryption demand. Daniel watched carefully. "Trigger the verification function," Roland said. Daniel pressed enter. At first, nothing. Then Roland opened a process monitor. 1 ghost process. 2, 5, 10, 20. Roland leaned forward. "Keep going." The number kept rising. 32, 46, 70. Mary pressed her hands together nervously. Daniel whispered, "Now wait for 217 load threshold." Roland checked the simulated clock. 2:16 a.m. The CPU meter jumped. 2:17. Suddenly, memory spiked violently. The server screen froze. Then crashed. Total shutdown. Silence filled the room. Roland stared at the black monitor. His voice was barely above a whisper. "This is it." Roland slowly turned toward Daniel. "How would you fix it?" Daniel stepped forward. "You don't remove the recursion," he said. "You control it." Roland narrowed his eyes. "Go on." "You add a termination condition. A final checkpoint that forces the function to release memory before repeating." Roland's mind was racing. Daniel began typing. He inserted 3 new logic lines. A controlled exit point. A memory release command. A verification reset. Roland watched every character. "You wrote this yourself?" Roland asked. "Yes, sir." "Where did you learn this level of memory control?" Daniel hesitated. "I studied open source encryption systems online." Roland stared at him. "Those are advanced materials." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I like understanding how things break." Roland almost smiled. "Run it," he said. Daniel executed the modified algorithm. Roland recreated the heavy load. 2:16 a.m. 2:17 a.m. The system paused. Memory usage climbed, then stabilized. No crash. Roland ran it again. And again. Stable. He leaned back in disbelief. For 3 months, his senior engineers, some earning 6-figure salaries, had failed to find this. And a 12-year-old boy fixed it in one night. The room was quiet now. No alarms. No spikes. No crashes. Roland stared at Daniel for a long time. His anger was gone, replaced by something else. Respect. You understand what you've done? Roland asked. Daniel nodded slowly. I think so. You just saved Security nearly $2 billion. Mary gasped softly. Daniel looked shocked. I wasn't thinking about money, he said. I just didn't like seeing the system fail. Roland studied him carefully. What do you want, Daniel? Daniel blinked. Sir, if you could have anything right now, what would it be? Daniel thought for a moment. A better computer, he said quietly. Mine freezes when I compile large programs. Roland felt something tighten in his chest. Not greed, not arrogance, just passion. Roland turned toward the dark city outside his window. 35 years ago, he had been a boy with no resources. Someone once gave him a chance. Now history was standing in front of him again, and this time, he was the one with the power to change a life. He turned back slowly. Daniel, he said firmly, I think tonight is only the beginning. That night, after everyone left the building, Roland remained alone in his office. The city lights shimmered below him, but he wasn't looking at the skyline. He was looking at an old photo on his desk, a younger version of himself, 22 years old, thin, determined, standing beside a broken computer in a tiny apartment. He remembered the hunger, not just for food, for opportunity. There was a time when no one believed in him. Investors laughed at him. Professors doubted him. Even friends told him to get a real job. But one man had taken a chance on him, a retired engineer who saw his potential and gave him access to equipment he could never afford. That small act changed everything. Roland whispered into the quiet room. Someone once believed in me. He closed his eyes. And now it's my turn. The next morning, Roland called a private executive meeting. The board members expected another crisis update. Instead, Roland stood calmly at the head of the table. The glitch is fixed, he said. Relief filled the room. How? One board member asked. Roland paused. By someone none of you would expect. He explained what happened. A 12-year-old boy, self-taught, no formal training, no resources. Silence followed. One board member frowned. You're saying a child found what our engineers couldn't? Yes, Roland replied firmly. Another asked, what are you planning to do? Roland's answer was clear. I'm creating a scholarship program under Security. The room shifted uncomfortably. That's charity, someone said. Roland shook his head. No, it's investment. He continued. There are thousands of brilliant children who will never enter this building because they lack opportunity. We will find them, and we will fund them. The board hesitated. Then Roland added one final sentence. If Security exists to protect the future, then we must also build it. The room fell silent again. This time, no one argued. 2 weeks later, Security held a major press event. News reporters gathered. Cameras flashed. Industry leaders attended. The company had recovered. Stock prices were stable again. But no one knew the real reason. Backstage, Daniel stood beside Mary. He wore a simple suit Roland had personally arranged for him. Mary adjusted his tie nervously. Are you ready? She whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Roland approached them. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, Roland said gently. Daniel looked up at him. I'm not afraid. Roland smiled slightly. Good. The stage manager signaled. It's time. Roland walked onto stage. The room filled with applause. He stood at the podium, waited, then began. Roland's voice was calm but strong. 3 months ago, Security faced the greatest technical crisis in its history. The audience leaned in. We were losing nearly $2 billion due to system failure no one could explain. Reporters began typing quickly. Our best engineers worked day and night. He paused. And yet, the solution did not come from our boardroom. The room grew quieter. It came from a 12-year-old boy. Murmurs spread across the audience. Roland gestured toward the side of the stage. Daniel stepped into the light. Cameras flashed rapidly. Roland continued. This young man identified a recursive flaw in our encryption algorithm, a hidden loop that created ghost processes and crashed our servers. The technical leaders in the room exchanged surprised looks. He fixed it. Applause began slowly, then grew louder. Roland looked at Daniel with pride. But tonight is not just about what he did. It is about what almost didn't happen. The room went still. Daniel does not come from wealth. He does not attend elite private schools. He is the grandson of one of the hardest working employees in this building. Mary wiped tears quietly backstage. Roland's voice deepened. If opportunity had not crossed paths with talent that night, we would never have known. He stepped away from the podium slightly. How many more Daniels are out there? How many brilliant minds are invisible because no one is looking? Silence. Then Roland made the announcement. Today, Security launches a Security Future Coder Scholarship. The screen behind him lit up. Full scholarships, equipment funding, mentorship programs, research access for underprivileged students with extraordinary talent in technology. Applause thundered across the room. Roland raised his hand gently. Brilliance does not belong to the privileged. It belongs to the curious. And curiosity can exist anywhere. He turned toward Daniel. Sometimes the person who saved your company is the one cleaning your floors. The audience stood in a full standing ovation. Mary cried openly. Daniel stood still, overwhelmed. Roland finished with one final line. Never underestimate quiet genius. Months passed. Applications for the scholarship flooded in. Thousands of children submitted coding samples, projects, ideas. Security built an entire department dedicated to discovering hidden talent. Daniel began attending one of the top technology academies in the country. He received brand new equipment, private mentorship sessions, advanced training, but he never became arrogant. He often visited Security after school. Engineers now asked him questions. They respected him. Mary no longer pushed a cleaning cart. As head of facilities management, she supervised teams confidently. Her salary had tripled. Her life had changed. But what changed most was Roland. He no longer saw Security as just a cybersecurity company. He saw it as a bridge between potential and opportunity. One evening, Roland stood again by his office window. The same city lights shimmer below. But this time he felt peace, because he understood something deeply. Success is not measured only by profit. It is measured by impact. And somewhere in a small apartment, another child might be learning to code on an old laptop. Another future genius. Waiting for someone to notice. Brilliance does not always arrive in a suit. It does not always speak loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, watching, learning, waiting. And when opportunity finally meets talent, the world changes.